Ask Stape anything. This is a new thing we're trying. I think this is for the first time. The entire webinar is dedicated to your questions. I am Den, as usual, yeah, your host, if I may say so. I have Vlad and Vlad, my teammates, helping in the Q&A to cover your sort of intermediate questions um, while I'm speaking. The way we're going to do it today, I'm going to go through the pre-selected questions which were sent to us by webinar with webinar registrations. We filtered those out, and there's like a 30 or something, I believe, that I want to go through, and they're part of these slides. And then at some point, we're switching back to actual live Q&A. So what you guys ask in the QA section, which will not be answered by that time by my colleagues here, I will cover live. And then the last couple of minutes, we will pick five best questions and then distribute some merch to those ladies or gentlemen. Mind you, this will be a very subjective pick. This will be dependent on my mood by the end of this session. So don't get offended or anything like that. Right. Stape is server-side tracking. I hope everybody knows that by now. Uh, just a reminder, we are a one-stop shop. We do pretty much everything that's related to server-side tracking, especially if we are talking Google Tag Manager, which I hope is the main tool of choice for you as well. So quickly running through this, right? We are a managed hosting, so your servers, your auto scaling, your updates of the GTM images, everything is handled by Stape. You never have to deal with that. We give you a bunch of power-ups. I hope you guys are familiar with those, which are essentially pre-coded solutions, pre-coded sort of yeah answers to some common cases. Custom loader is one, bypassing ad blockers. Cookie keeper is another one, combating ITP. GTM templates were the largest contributor to GTM community gallery. I verified that uh, every single day, pretty much. I think we are the author of about 10% of the gallery at this point. On the product side, we have all of those enablement tools, we call them. There's a tracking checker, the scanner, which can give you a report on what's going on. There's a setup assistant available now, which can simplify you switching to server-side tracking. There's the Stape store, which is a persistent storage, and we can discuss some use cases of that if we have the time. Platform integrations, again, I hope the crowd is familiar. We have all the apps for Shopify's, WordPress, HubSpots of the world, and all of that goodness. Enterprise features, not sure I'm talking to the correct public right now, but there are plenty of those. There's the single sign-on, there's the custom agreements and everything. And of course, we have our lovely support, which part of that team is answering your questions today on the webinar here. Knowledge sharing is a given. This webinar is one example of that. So again, I want to say welcome to everyone. We do this every month, and we're happy to see you here. We have just turned 5 years old, which is a bit of an achievement I'm happy about. We have more than 200,000 clients and 500 agency partners. We serve more than 10 billion requests daily, over 25 locations, and we are the most certified server-to-server vendor you will find out there in the wild. The amount of certificates on your screen right now is not extensive. We have at least double this. Now, for the main course, the pre-selected Q&A, I'll just go and jump into that. Mind you, whoever's asking something in the chat, I'm not reading the chat right now, really concentrated on delivering this to you guys. So chat is handled by my colleagues, Vlad and Vlad. I don't get, annoyed if I'm not reacting to your question in the chat just yet. If there's anything you want to bring for the live Q&A, please post it in the Q&A section, not into the chat. Those are two different things. It's impossible for me to digest the entire chat, but the Q&A I'll do. All right, let's dive into it. Let's do the pre-selected. Yeah, this is the common one, right? This is a bit of an inside joke, but yes. Will I receive the webinar recording after the webinar? Yes, 100% you will. This will be on our YouTube channel. Normally, it's Thursday today. Normally, we load it by Monday or Tuesday. And you will also receive a follow-up email with the link to that recording and some supporting material. So again, if you're late or anything, you will get everything. No worries there. This is weird. But anyway, yeah, you'll get the recording. We already talked through that. Now come the questions that the registrants actually send. So, why invest in a Stape account and what benefits could that bring? Well, there's so many. I don't know where to start. Why invest in a Stape account? So, Stape account is your hosting for a tool. The tool can be server Google Tag Manager. The tool can be one of the dedicated gateways, such as the Meta Conversion API gateway or TikTok Events API gateway, Snap Conversion API gateway. Those are all tools that, in one shape or form, fix some of your tracking challenges. They either prolong the cookies, so benefit your attribution. They either bypass or they bypass ad blockers, such as we do with GTM, and yeah, do a bunch of magic around that. So investing into Stape is investing into infrastructure that would allow you to run your tracking um, endeavors, let's say, easier, cheaper, quicker, and more reliable than otherwise. Hope that answers it. We implemented Stape on our e-commerce site at the start of October. We have since seen increased Google Ads volatility and large negative swings in performance. Could our integration be at fault? Well, unfortunately, yes, your integration could be at fault. It's very hard to give you like a proper informative answer based on this input alone. But the first thing I would say is yes, somebody needs to check your integration. You can reach out to our care team. You can talk to some freelancer. You can do it internally, just run an audit. Most of the time, if you're seeing any sort of swings like described here, and if you're seeing them post new integration, so after you introduce something new, that those are very likely two connected sort of occurrences, right? So I would say potentially something is wrong with your Google Ads. One very basic example, I don't want to assume that this applies to the author, but one basic example is people keep on their client side tracking and start reporting from the server with the same conversion actions, or maybe like consent has been mishandled. Maybe there's just some typos here and there. A lot of things can go wrong. So essentially, in a situation like this, I would just advise to run through the entire container and like do a proper audit of what's going on there. Test every single tag, make sure that it fires when you expect it to fire, and that it fires with the payloads that you expect it to fire with. In Shopify, when Stay app's data layer is not used, will the cookie keeper and custom loader still work? We found a workaround by adopting the code provided in the app so it can be used as a custom pixel, but I'm not 100% sure that this is the right approach. Okay, that's a good question. So, yes, cookie keeper and custom loader will work, assuming you set up those correctly, right? For cookie keeper, that means you reference proper cookies that we use in Shopify. For custom loader, that just means, well, embedded in a proper place. So the answer to the first question is yes, absolutely, it will work. We found a workaround by adopting the code provided in the app, so it can be used as a custom pixel, but I'm not like I wouldn't know why have you done that. I will imagine you have your reasons. It's viable so long as it's working for you. So yeah, you can do it, but then I'm not sure what have you solved for by eliminating our app from the equation. The beauty of the app is, again, we maintain it for you, we fix bugs in it, and there's a level of reliability that you can expect. I'm sending event ID to SGTM via the GA4 client. However, the event ID received server side is different, likely because SGTM only accepts up to 25 characters, which causes IDs to be trimmed and deduping to fail. Well, I this is the first time I'm hearing about SGTM accepting only 25 characters. That's factually incorrect. Again, I will assume that if the event ID you're plugging in on the web is different from the one you're receiving on the server, your most likely culprit for this would be tag sequencing on the web container. Because when you fire tags as a what's it called, setup or cleanup tag, right? So you're using tag sequencing in like a standard tag UI on WebGTM, that messes up with some internal mechanisms that like event ID is using, and you will get an event ID that is not associated with event you would expect it to. So check if this occurs in a tag sequencing case or environment, let's say, and that's probably your culprit. There's no character limitation for especially 25 characters for a string. That's just not true. How to set up Stape for Facebook ads? Oh, well, you always get some question like that. Essentially, go ahead, create an account, go ahead, create a server container in your Google Tag Manager. And if you're running on an e-commerce platform or something like that, use our setup assistant. If not, if you're running something else, if you're doing like a custom website or anything, just type Meta or Facebook into search on Stape, and our blog will spit out like a 10 plus articles on how you could do it start to finish. One other tool you can use for this would be Stape Academy. That's a thing that's available to every single customer. There's a full-fledged course on like server-side tracking and how to do it with us. And Meta is one of the examples used there. Hi, Stape team. I'm getting a 400 error from the Facebook Conversions API template, even though I followed your documentation exactly. All parameters seem correct. Any idea what could cause this? So the answer is you open preview, you look at the tag details, and you look at the response that Facebook is returning to you. Beyond the 400 status, there's usually a body of an error, which will give you some clues, and those clues are also Googleable, searchable, that can point you to why this is happening. From the experience, most likely your conversion API token, your access token for Facebook, either doesn't have enough permissions or has been revoked or something like that. That's the most common sort of reason. But then again, you really need to look at the body of the response that Facebook is returning to you, because usually that contains clues as to why this was a 400 hit. For the conversion linker, where when it is used only on the web container or only on the server container, what options should be selected? How do these settings affect the setup? By default, no options should be touched if you don't know what you're doing, meaning like if you're just browsing around, your conversion linker in a basic, let's call it, in default mode is good enough. You don't need to touch anything. How do these settings affect the setup? Well, it depends on which settings. The web one, if I recall correctly, has more, where you can pass through the attributes and override the cookie values, which again, I don't suggest you do unless you specifically know what you're doing. Your normal basic conversion linker is enough most of the time. And again, I want to say, I hope it's the server one. Yeah. Are data client and data tag in GTM important, and why? Hmm, I don't know. How is Facebook important? Like it's what I'm trying to say is they are tools, and they can be important. The benefits of the combination is this is an agnostic sort of data stream. This by itself is not going anywhere. This is not structured in a GE4 schema or any other vendor schema. The whole point behind data tech and data client is data which you can pass in any kind of shape that you want to, and that it's fully agnostic from any other vendor. So you can use that as a transfer mechanism from your web container to the server container. An added benefit of that is that the data tag patterns of the request that is generated are normally not part of any heuristics of like an ad blocker. So they inherently will not even be attempted to be blocked, right? But then again, I don't know if I can answer the question of important. It's only important if you use them. Pretty important, I would say. You can still live off of GE4, which is the sort of standard approach, and that's absolutely fine. Can Stay be a solution for websites in the health category that are prevented from installing pixel events by their meta tags? Well, yes and no, depending on what you're calling a solution in this case. Like, if Meta is deeming your business to be in the restricted category, those restrictions still apply whether you do it on Stape, not with Stape, with Conversion API, not with Conversion API. So you can like If you are actually prevented from installing pixels, you can go ahead and report just conversion API, but those conversions will be subject to Facebook's restrictions anyway, because, well, that has to do with legal, and, well, we're not helping by passing any of that. Why do we need server-side tracking? Does SST resolve the not set and unknown issues in GE4? This is actually four questions. Okay. So why do we need server-side tracking? You need server-side tracking because otherwise you are missing out on so much data. You're missing out first. A huge portion of signal is going away because there's ad blockers. Two, you are not prolonging your cookies enough for them to be relevant for the attribution efforts by your ad cabinets, Facebook, Google Ads, and whatnot. And three, I would say, is more case by case situation. But three, server side tracking enables you to connect other channels which are not browser to your tracking stack. So because server-side lives in a cloud and it's a server by name, you can send signal there not only from your browser, but from your CRM systems, your data lakes, your data warehouses, your internal inventory systems, from third-party platforms, whatever it is. And all of that will sort of live in a single pipeline, all ending up in your server GTM before you process it and distribute it to any sort of destination. So those three are the reasons. Does SST resolve not set and unknown? Not by virtue of being SST, the not set and unknown in GE4. There's a ton of material. I urge everybody to, again, put the not set in a search on both Google and Stape. There will be a ton of material. SST on its own, by just virtue of being there, doesn't solve this. The not set and unknown usually has to do with issues in your configuration. Why does SST considered more accurate than client-based tracking? Pretty much I just went over that. More accurate as in you're getting more signal, which you otherwise would never receive. And second is, even within the signal you are receiving, you can expect the cookies to actually last longer on a customer browser than they would if you just had the client-side tracking. If we implement SST, are there any technical processes involved and how can we resolve them using Stape? Oh, I don't know how to package that. We can do like a whole webinar on that. Technical processes involved. The most technical thing you have to do are DNS records because you want to create a subdomain to be in a first-party context compared to your website. Most of the other technical stuff, Stape resolves for you because, again, we took care of the infrastructure. You never have to understand how GTM is running under the hood. We given you tools like Setup Assistant to make your onboarding easier. And then if you're on like Shopify or any popular platform, we also give you the apps that give you kind of what's the word? Well, the background kind, let's say the dependencies for all of this to run. So I'm thinking we took most of the technical out of it. The most complicated thing you have to do is figure out DNS and create a subdomain. The purchases reported in my Shopify store and what Meta and Google Ads show are completely different. Will Stape help improve data accuracy and impact campaign optimization? Well, let me go from the end. Yes, we will help indirectly. I literally just went over the ways how. So yes, we will ultimately feed better data into your into your ads cabinets so that they in return can do their job better and optimize your campaigns better. Now, the purchases reported in my Shopify store and what Meta and Google Ads show are completely different. Well, you should never be comparing those in the first place. Google Ads shows you attributed purchases to Google Ads. Shopify shows you all orders. Meta, depending on where you're looking, in the Ads Manager will only show you attributed purchases. In the Event Manager, supposed to be showing you all purchases, but then consent plays a role. If you are in EU and you're running a consent banner, not all of your orders are supposed to be tracked and delivered to these platforms. That's one. Two, your Shopify very likely, when you're looking at orders, also has like offline orders, draft orders, some refunds, some subscription renewals, if that's a thing in your case, which again, most likely is not anyhow reflected in your tracking stack. So you should never really be comparing them just like back to back. You have to keep in mind what it is you're comparing. A kind of extreme example of this would be add to cart, because when you're looking at the amount of add to carts in Shopify, you are presented with the amount of sessions that added anything to cart, not with the amount of event occurrences of, cart addition. So be very careful when you do direct comparison, and then be mindful of consent and where you're looking at. Like Google Ads will only show you attributed conversions, not just conversions. We have implemented a consent management platform and we would like to start using Stape, or at least we're thinking about it. Well, I'm glad to hear that. But how will Stape and CMP work together? Like a charm is my answer. There's absolutely no problem with that. CMP, any proper CMP will push what's called consent mode v2, so it will let know the GTM and GTAG that this or that consent decision has been made, and you can set up all of your tags to react to that accordingly. Also, like in our setup assistance, for instance, we have the option for you to pick your consent provider, and we'll give you a setup that is tailored around that specific consent provider. So there's absolutely nothing stopping you consent-wise to start using Stape or server-side tracking in general. Ooh, setup. The main site SSD is myhotelbrand.com. The external IBE is reservation myhotelbrand.com using domain masking. Issue. The IB vendor is unfamiliar with SSD. A solution is needed without changing vendors. So I wouldn't know what unfamiliar means, but they don't really have to be familiar. So long as you can put a code snippet on that website, and so long as it is indeed reservation myhotelbrand.com, not a redirect, you have everything you need. If you can embed WebGTM on that subdomain on reservation, your vendor doesn't need to know anything about server side, because ultimately that WebGTM will distribute to your server container and then you do with it what you like. So that's not really an issue, right? The cross domain, again, questionable. How does this apply in this situation? I'm not sure. If the reservation myhotelbrand.com ultimately lands me on a third party domain, I think the only cross domain you can do is by virtue of adding something to the query parameter, be it with GE4 native cross domain tracking or do it manually or something. Like you need some sort of a stitch in between. A piece of data can be a generic ID that will stitch the user from domain A on a domain B. Rest of the associated data you can pass through the server. You can use Stape Store for that, but you need a matching agent, a matching ID to be available on both ends. Again, this only applies if your site B, so reservation, is actually on a different top level domain. If it's not, then there's no cross domain tracking involved in the first place. Mobile app tracking for iOS when IDFA is not available. Mobile app to SGTM to Meta Conversions API to Meta Ads Manager. No PII data is used, but we utilize FBCLID store from the mobile app to our server, our external ID, and event ID for the duplication. I'm not sure what's your question though. Like it sounds like you have everything under control. This is pretty neat. When IDFA is not available, if you can fall back on a FBCLID, which you, well, judging by the outline, have stored previously, lovely. You can do it. You should do it. Please do it. That's the way to be. Not sure what the question was, but I don't see any faults in what's, presented here. So cool. Meta requires a double tracking setup, event deduplication. Does Google Analytics 4 G4 require the same? So no, I want to say Meta doesn't require it. They will recommend it. They will tell you that's the sort of a best practice and everything. The reason for that is mostly that the client-side tracking will still pick up on third-party cookies in Chrome. And their pixel, the FB Events JS, is packed with a ton of, metadata parsing and all of that goodness, which your campaigns ultimately benefit from. But that's not a hard requirement. You can still live with just conversion API. So that's point one. Point two, does Google Analytics G4 require the same? No, it doesn't. When changing the tracking setup from client side to server side, should the server container URL parameter be set for every GE4 tag? I would say so, yes. by default, you only need it in a configuration tag, and since other tags are looking at that configuration, you can expect everything to go there. However, you have edge cases where your event fires before your configuration tag fires, and all of that goodness. So I would consider it a really good practice to have server container URL in every single one of your tags explicitly so that you are sure that whenever it fires, it will always be delivered to the server, not directly to analytics in any of the edge cases, which we don't have the time to go through, but I mean, it doesn't hurt you and it's a good practice. Also, you don't really need to do it like by hand in every single tag. You can use what's called there aren't to what you just asked. Uh, Meta has been really helpful installing Stape's tracking into their Pixel. I mean, I'm not quite sure what that means, but okay, cool. I had seen that a subdomain has been set up too. Is help regarding this available from you, or is this not necessary? Anyone want to help me guess? I mean, Meta has been helpful. Great. Okay. I had seen that a subdomain has been set up too. So I can assume from the first sentence that you're probably talking about the gateway. I assume in the gateway solution, you can create also point a subdomain as you would do with SGTM. And you should really do that. That only benefits you. So I want to say yes, but I am not 100% confident what kind of question I'm answering here. So if the author want to follow up, maybe in Q&A here or offline, please do that. Happy to help, but just not quite certain what's going on. Is Stape only useful for the EU region? No, it's useful anywhere. If they will have internets region because of what EU region demands of you for data residency and things like that, which is something that we fully support and we fully comply with. But every single benefit and a lot of those I already talked through today is applicable if you're outside of EU. Doesn't matter if you're in, I don't know, Americas, APAC, anywhere. Is my Google Analytics setup using GTM server-side? Oh, sorry. In my Google Analytics setup using GTM server-side, 40 to 50% of users are not being tracked. What are the best practices to maximize the percentage of users successfully tracked through a server-side implementation? Have you, I mean, I would say you want to explore where that is coming from, why 40 to 50% of users are not being tracked. One common kind of response to that would be your consent. So if you are running a consent banner, I would go and check your opt-out rates. Possibly, sounds a bit too high, but very possible that indeed there's like, 50% of people are not giving you consent to be tracked, hence nothing is landing in your GA4 property. Second is, hey, I mean, again, you may unfortunately have some faults in the implementation on any level, on the web container, on the server container, in the data that you're passing, in your triggers. So I would suggest, again, like auditing that, your containers, looking at the consent and maximizing percentage. Well, I mean, if you do a proper setup, you can expect outside of consent, you can expect at least 90%, actually more of consented users to end up in your analytics properties or any destinations. The biggest thing that contributes to that would be our custom loader, which, as I mentioned, lets you bypass ad blockers. The rest sort of is dependent on your setup. If you want best practices on the setup, please come through our content. Please use Setup Assistant. That will give you the skeletons of how it should look like, and you can adopt your existing setup to that. But in a vacuum, without having more information, I feel like yeah, something's probably wrong because 40 to 50 sounds a bit too much or too little, however you want to look at it. If my site moved to Shopify, do I still need Stape? I don't understand that question. Uh, yes, I guess. Like if you had Stape set up running on some shop and it wasn't Shopify. Now you move to Shopify. Don't you have the same needs for your tracking and such? I imagine you would. If the question is, can I just use like Shopify native apps? Well, you can, but I mean, I would advise against that probably in most situations. At the very least, you don't have the control which you otherwise have with Google Tag Manager. So tomorrow you need to introduce a change into this or that event. You will not be able to do that with those native apps. Again, running on assumptions here, right? So can CAPI via Stay be installed on a custom site, especially considering a very niche e-commerce platform and a business model? Absolutely. It doesn't matter. Business model is not a dimension here at all. A very niche e-commerce platform. So long as you can pull the data for your e-commerce tracking, your product IDs, or at least your value currency, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be from a data layer, although that, of course, would be better, you still can do it. There's no constraints like that. That's the beauty of the whole thing. If there's data on the website to be pulled from somewhere, or maybe not even on the website, you can go full server to server. Will be a bit more complicated. But if you have a data source for your e-commerce tracking, yes, absolutely, by all means, you can use this, us, Cappy, everything, and you should. I have questions about the products. Which ones do I need and which ones not? I would like to clarify what the best solution for my SSD is. So we only offer so much, like five overall. The answer is simple. Do you run more than a single platform? Like, do you do advertising on something else than Facebook? If the answer is yes, your your go-to is Server GTM most of the time. Again, if I need to give a blanket answer, pick SGTM. That will be as future-proof as it gets, and that will cover more ground than anything else that we offer. And the amount of features, the amount of support, the amount of guides, the amount of everything would be much more prevalent on for server-side GTM rather than the gateways. I hope this answers the question. I noticed that when we use GTM for setup, the Bing Ads conversion tracking tag fired successfully, but the conversion live data did not record. What is the solution? Okay, did not record. If you're just checking real time, the tag just fired and you're looking at your Bing interface expecting to see something there, that's probably never happening. The second point is same as Google Ads. The guys from the chat can correct me, but I believe same as Google Ads, Bing only shows you attributed conversions. So the fact that you've sent it some signal doesn't necessarily mean that it will pop up in your UI because that conversion may have not been attributed. Beyond that, attribution takes time usually on those platforms, so you should not be expecting it in like real time. Give it a few seconds at least. And then there's the obvious answer, which is like check if all the IDs, all the everything is correct. I hope you did that. But yeah, that's my answer. I asked the client's developers to set up our own CDN and send them your documentation, but they said it was too complicated. Okay, how can I help them set it up more easily? So, if I understand correctly, you don't really need your own CDN, and if it's own CDN that you actually send them, I kind of get why they said it's a little bit too complicated. My answer would be search for same origin again on Stape, just in a search bar, search for same origin. That gives you the same benefits in terms of cookies and everything, but your developers will have a much easier time implementing that. That's the best answer I can give you because I mean, if they said it's too complicated, it's too complicated for me as well. So yeah, do same origin. How to transfer an existing client account under agency one? Talk to support. Easy. Raise a ticket. Or your account manager. Do you have any plans for tracking on DSP's demand side platforms? I really want to have a conversation with the person who raised this. My exposure to DSPs is a little bit limited, but most of the time, again, in my exposure, you don't need any sort of specific solution. The way I was exposed to DSPs is in their native sort of interfaces and settings and such, I was always able to put a postback URL. That postback URL was my server container, and that delivered me enough data to do with it whatever I need to. But then again, this is a very, very broad question. There's probably a ton of use cases. So whoever raised this, please reach out LinkedIn or anywhere. I'm happy to talk and discuss this. If there's demand for this, we will absolutely do it like a tag or anything. So hey, reach out. Can we also use State for Google Ads conversion API? There's no Google Ads conversion API. That's not a thing, not existent. There's Google Data Manager API currently brewing, just recently out of beta and not with full functionality. That will kind of sort of be conversion API from Google with its own nuances. And yes, that one you can absolutely use with Stape. In fact, we already support it, so you can again put it into search on Stape. But it's not called Cappy literally, so just in case. But yeah, what Google is offering along those lines, you can absolutely use on Stape, 100%. And we actually have made it easier than it would otherwise be for you. What are the best practices for SPA sites where we already have traffic with user ID and CMP setup to avoid too many new users? Why would you have new users though? I'm not quite sure I understand. The best practices is everything as usual, except that your page view triggers are now your history changes as well because the page never reloads. And that would be it. There's no way it would generate new users unless I'm missing something. So is it possible to have major events like purchase tracked via SGTM while WebGTM only tracks basic events like add to cart to reduce the cost? Yes and no. So in principle, yes, you can decide which event you route where. But if we're talking G4, that will break your data big time because the server side hits and the client side hits will rely on a different set of cookies in part, and that will end up like you will have mess in your GA4. But if we're talking other platforms, if you can kind of afford it, meaning like if you're okay with the fact what you call basic events will be less tracked, less attributed, less whatever, maybe you don't use them for optimization in the first place, then technically that is doable. Yes. But I guess in the grand scheme of things wouldn't be advisable because you ultimately benefit from pushing as much as possible to a platform, even if you're not actively optimizing on that event. Like Meta, for instance, will train your pixel, do a ton of like machine learning and such to have it operate better for you. So you might be kind of cutting yourself at a knee a little bit. But like I said, outside of GE4, technically viable. So yeah. Any Black Friday deals? Sorry, but on the fence at the moment, so need the push incentive. Yeah, stay tuned. I think like the promotion starts next week, something like that. So just you know, be on the lookout on our social media, LinkedIn and whatnot. And yeah, something will definitely reach you. Oh, cool. That was quicker than I thought. So let me just okay, we have like 15 minutes more. Cool. Done with those. Let me see what's up in the Q&A. What are your plans for gtmtools.com? It's often offline and needs some developments in the UX. Well, good sir, our plans is we are still supporting it. There's no active features being developed right now, although a few are in the backlog. As to off and offline, whenever you notice that, please report it to us so that we can improve it. And well, UX, I want to say if you ever if you ever worked with GTM API, that will probably explain most of the UX quirks you find there. Again, I'm assuming a lot, but that API is not really built for humans. So, and that informs a lot of decisions made on GTM tools. I really like the fact that, you're using it and everything. So if you have feedback, please go ahead and share it. We are not dropping support for it or anything. So we will be very interested in hearing that. So yeah, please reach out. Right, let me mark that as anyway. I would like to know more about what you recommend on event parameters, the cookie values like FBQ or FBC, and how to handle them. What happens if they are ignored, not attached to events? What should happen if they are attached? Better attribution? Thanks. Robin, you 99% of the time, you don't have to handle them explicitly. The tag templates, Meta, TikTok, Snap, Pinterest, whatever, will pick up the cookie from the cookie header. So it will pick it up from the incoming event payload automatically because both ourselves, or rather yourself and the destination, are interested in getting that information as much as possible. So if you don't handle them explicitly, that is, you put no values into the associated inputs, into the associated boxes, the tag will pick them up from the cookies. There's only very limited situations, such as like Shopify checkout extensibility, where you have to handle the cookie explicitly. But by default, any template, at least any Stape author template, will pick up cookies from the cookie header automatically without you having to do anything with that. How could Stape as GTM in reporting events from our mobile app like add to cart, purchase, etc. In case user does not give consent on iOS ATT, we could somehow get some non-PI IDs like IDFA, store it on the backend, and then Stape as GTM to send an event data to Facebook, including IDs like IDFA, customer for sure, Facebook SDK will not send data if ATT is not accepted, but at least we to have basic events on Facebook for better decision making. So Spiros, I'm sorry if I'm butchering that. Uh, Again, technically viable. I don't want to put myself in position of giving you legal advice. I'm not quite sure if like the original consent was not given, the amount of data you can actually swing or not swing towards Facebook. That's the bigger question here. But technically, what you said, that kind of flow is absolutely possible. So, yeah, so long as you're comfortable with it legally, if you consulted like a DPO or somebody with a similar role in your company, like go ahead. I think like IDFA potentially can be somehow treated as sort of PII, but then again, I'm no legal counsel, so don't quote me on this, please. Is in terms of technical capacity, that's absolutely possible, yes. Recently, Cloudflare was down. Is Stape still working okay? Whether there are such accidents, my container stops working. Your container doesn't stop working, but we are part of the internet as everyone else. So there's bits and pieces that are Cloudflare dependent. One example would be if you're using Stape CDN. So if you're using a load dot domain, that is done through Cloudflare, and that was unresponsive. Was it yesterday or the day before? I'm not sure when the Cloudflare was done. So yeah, your tracking is affected. It's also affected outside of state because your destinations might be subject to Cloudflare issues. So yeah, but then your containers in principle are still working, right? We are not hosted on Cloudflare, and if you're just doing direct DNS records, non-proxied through CDN, we were still there. But in a situation that hit us everyone like a few days ago, you would be affected directly or indirectly, unfortunately, because Cloudflare is such a big part of our lives. Uh, yeah. Right. Can I send Google Sheet data to SGTM via Stape API? Can I send Google Sheet data? Sure. That would be a webhook in principle. That's an HTTP request that you send to an endpoint, which is your SGTM, where you have hopefully data client to claim it as any other incoming HTTP request. So you can whip up some scripts in your Google Sheets to, I don't know, on schedule or on a button click, send some stuff to SGTM. 100% you can. Can I add update? Let me stop screen share. I'll show you my face. Can I, let me see Q&A again. Can I add, update, or delete Google Sheet data into Stape Store using Stape API? I want to send Google Sheet data with Stape Store data automatically. Yeah, you can. We have an API for that. The one that actually the variables and the tags use. So that is doable. I want to question, why do you need to keep them in sync? Couldn't you, like, if you're resorting to syncing up with an API, why wouldn't you just populate the Stape store in the first place with that API? But again, you have a use case. So, yes, the answer to both of your questions is yes. Spirus, again, sorry. We fall into health category, thus we have some limitation from Meta. For example, we can't send email via pixel conversion API, advanced matching is disabled, etc. What we need to do is to track better for our iOS mobile app in case the user does not accept ATT. For example, if we get FBCLID on the mobile app side, then send FBCLID. Well, you see here again, my view of this is that the user does not accept, you're not supposed to be tracking them in the first place, PII or not. That would be the sort of straightforward way of understanding it, right? But again, you're putting me on the spot here. I don't want to give you legal advice. If what you're describing is acceptable legally for you, then technically it's more than doable. You pretty much described how to do it. So technically, be my guest. Legally, I wouldn't know. Don't wanna, don't wanna be that guy. Did you test your competition, user-centric SSD, for example? We sure did. Is that the whole question? I mean, yeah, we actively look at our competitors for sure all the time. There's I think I have a dedicated spot on the calendar for doing that, among other things. So yeah. Will you place an AI chatbot on your site? Trade on your data and docs, of course. That would probably make your customers more productive, spending less time trying to figure some settings up. So the current chatbot, actually, the first thing that greets you is AI. You can still reach the human if you want to, but we will attempt to spit out some articles at you based on AI. If you're talking like full scale assistant or something like that, there's internal talks about something like it. I cannot like commit to anything on this webinar, but might just happen. Thank you for that question. It's a good one. Because if a company has 50K products and want to send profits to GAds, then it's impossible to monitor, add, update, delete that volume of products manually. Right, which is what I'm saying. You want to eliminate probably then the Google Sheet altogether and do it all programmatically with an API, which Stape Store has one, so you can do it all there. Again, I imagine there's more nuance. So your original question about connecting Google Sheets and all of that sync, absolutely viable. You can do it. All right, I'm out of questions. Interestingly enough, do you guys have some more? I have 9 more minutes. There's one. So if I understand correctly, only limitation is with data collection, conversion tracking is if we are using cookie consent and visitors are rejecting it. Unless that all other data loss due to Safari, ad blockers, and other, if there's any, if there's any, is covered by SST with Stape. Yes, so we cannot be a solution for you to bypass consent. Even if it's technically somehow possible, you should not be resorting to it. So if your drop of usage, sorry, drop of analytics users or whatever is informed by consent, that's something you should learn to live with because that's in the legal dimension. But then the data loss due to Safari, ad blockers, and all of that is covered by SST. So that you can compensate for by going server side. Correct. All right. I'm gonna give you a couple more minutes to send more questions if there's any. Otherwise, I'll start picking winners. Thanks, Dan. Oh, my pleasure. That's what I'm here. Okay. I don't see new stuff popping up. So let me. I have to pick five, right? That's complicated. I hope I don't offend like anyone. Guys, be gentle.
But then there
Oh,
are
here's a question.
questions.
There's a question. Yay. Thanks, Dan. Please repeat the webinar from time to time. Well, if you mean like ask me anything, sure. We just might. I was testing State Store. I used Restore plus OPE. I'm not sure. Object. Oh, Object Property Extractor. Okay. I was storing all user data, email, phone, address fields, and then used transformations to augment user data. The problem was too many requests. It was a full wall. Then I had to switch to writer plus lookup. It worked, but I'd like to use restore. Uh, I mean, I have a ton of answers to that potentially, but they are all very subjective to your specific situation. I don't know if you really have to use restore specifically. That's one. Two, even in a writer plus lookup, you may be generating a ton of redundant requests, and there's ways to amend that. So I don't have like a definitive answer. If you want, reach out. We can look at your stuff and just give you some general advice, or maybe you can post it on our community. That would be a good place where I am active among other things. So I would take a look. Ultimately, you can reduce the amount of requests you generate to store. Whether restore is the best approach for that, not quite certain, but again, need to look at your specific case. We are considering to implement. Okay, guys, by the way, now you can stop with the questions because we don't have the time. I'm covering the one, two, three, four, five that are in the Q&A right now, and then I have to pick winners and go get some tea. So, yeah. We are considering to implement CDP, probably Rudderstack for clients. Should we consider implementing Stape first, or the order of the implementation doesn't matter? Please make a suggestion. I'm not too familiar with how exactly Rudderstack works, but I'm thinking if you're implementing a CDP, there's a ton of merit for you to do it server side one way or another, because again, that means that potentially you will have data from other sources, not just the browser. And then for that data, you can also utilize CDP to enrich it. So if you're considering a CDP and you combine it with just a server container in principle, I think your sort of capabilities are that much wider, but there's no hard relationship as in one should, come in before the other. There's no like technical restrictions, but it could be, depending on how you intend to use it, beneficial to do server side first. Are there some additional cookie settings to set up server side on Shopify? No. If you use our setup assistant, that gives you a full on template, container template for web and server containers. Everything that needs to be handled there is already handled. When using state delay events, GeoHeader's not working. They are giving wrong data. Please fix. Thank you, sir. I've seen your question before. That is indeed true. That is in the backlog, and we will address it someday. The power up you're referring to is not really widely used, or rather, not used enough. But definitely, that's an issue, and we'll be fixing it. So thank you for the feedback. Custom domain deactivated out of the blue. No DNS change. What should I do? I would raise a ticket with support to just figure out what's going on, but I would also double check if there is DNS, if DNS like in fact exists or doesn't. But your go-to solution is raise a ticket with support. Those guys will take care of you. Can you please clarify once per page and once per event when to use one, when to use another? Normally, never use either unless you have a case for. Once per page means once within. Okay, in GTM that means once per page, like the actual web page loaded, right? So you can think of it as once per gtm.js being loaded, which means that on an SPA, on a single page application, all of your pages would be considered one page. So never use once per page on an SPA. Once per event means that it will only fire once on that data event. Normally once per page view tag, once per event for event tags. Again, unless you have reasons to specifically touch those settings, they are redundant. If it's not an SPA or you need to enforce some restrictions, you don't need to touch either. That's not like best practice or whatever. Most of the time you simply don't need it. Don't overcomplicate things. But if you have to, the usage would be dictated by, well, by your case, right? Last one. Okay, last one. Are there any Stape Discord Slack channels recommended where clients or partners hang out and support each other? Oh, that's such a good one. I'm gonna pass it back because again, we had some discussions on maybe doing something like that. So far, no, there's not a public one. There's Measure Slack by Simo. If you're there, you can find us there. A lot of the team is there, and like feel free to ping us. But like the public one, Stape specific, the best next thing to it is our community. It's community.stape.io. It's not like a chat, it's a forum more, but that's the next best thing we have. So come join and share your questions there. All right, I have 1 minute on the schedule. I have to pick five winners, which is a complicated in the first place. So again, nobody get offended, please. I want to say Sergey Lysenko gets one because of the question on the geo headers not working for the delay. You essentially worked as our QA in this instance. So congratulations. We'll reach out for your contacts to send you something. Literally, thank you for using that power up and being thorough and checking what's going on. So hey, that's one. Two. By the way, I want to prefer the live people to the pre-vetted questions. So most of you guys are getting it. Okay, what else was there? Let me comb through answered. Merchant reports huge data inaccuracies. Yada yada yada. No, not interesting. The mobile app, right? Spyros or Spiros. Sorry, man. Again, I tend to pay a lot of attention to that. But the mobile app questions I like. The reason it's very relevant. This is like relatively new, and you can utilize SGTM for mobile tracking. So you get your T-shirt just for the fact you're into all that. Tomas, for the CDP question, that will be our number three. I want to say number four. Philip, the state store question and object property extractor and the amount of requests and restore and everything, that's a very, I want to say niche kind of case, but that case is very close to my heart. And we told you this is subjective. So, Philip, you get a t shirt. And I need to pick the last one from the pre selected questions. So, mobile, that was you again. Sure. Okay. Somebody has sent me a question on DSPs, demand side platform tracking. I think it's Mr. Parvis. We have your email because this is from registration. We will reach out for that T-shirt. So there you go, five of them, and I've named them all. And thanks everyone for coming to this thing. We hold a webinar every month, so come say hi. And of course, you're gonna get a recording and everything. So I wish you all a good rest of your day. Thank you and bye.